Welcome to the Western Bell podcast series, with talks on traditional spiritual teaching and its application in the world today. The intention of this series is to offer something useful for those who are drawn to study themselves and engage practice on the spiritual path. New talks are posted twice each month. The content of the talks is for informational purposes only, and not to provide any kind of counseling, medical, or professional advice. This podcast is titled Red Hot Sadhana, in the Fire of Love and Loss. The talk was given by Jessica Jens on December 21st, 2024 via Zoom. Jessica is a meditation teacher, coach, and the author of Red Hot Steel, Love Behind Bars, a book about love and loss with a man incarcerated in a maximum security prison, written in the context of her spiritual work. In this talk, she describes her intense experience with the prison system and the spiritual work she has engaged in relationship, which is especially relevant for those with a need to make peace with the past. Jessica states that we all live in a self-imposed prison, and that we learn about its nature and the way out by going through fire. She draws on teachings and perspectives of Stephen Jenkinson on grief and love, Dr. Robert Svoboda on karma, and Ma Devaki, the closest disciple of the Indian master Yogiram Sarat Kumar, on how there are no mistakes. She considers Lee Lozowick's statement, seek beauty and avoid suffering, and reads evocative poetry by Charles Bukowski. If there is benefit in this talk for you, please consider sharing the link to it or writing a review on social media or on one of the podcast platforms. Jessica Jens.
Thank you for the space and all for creating some time on a Saturday evening. I just like to acknowledge the earth, whatever piece of earth we're sitting on. Earth and sun have been a big part of my process over the last couple of years. Just really connecting and honoring all that they give, and the ancestors in our areas and the lineage, whatever lineages we're part of or not part of, any mentors, just giving thanks, asking for support. May this be a useful space for all of us in some way or the other. So I am from New Jersey, so you might hear an accent, and I have that kind of sense of humor too. Currently, I'm in California. I just have been on a journey and let go of everything and drove across country on November 1st, and am hosted by a dear new friend in Southern California, enjoying the sunshine and picking oranges every day from a tree and eating one every day. And when you eat fruit or vegetables that you've grown and you have a relationship to the plant, or you grow a relationship to the plant. I'm not going to forget the topic. Don't worry. I am a little wandering, but I come back. I was just appreciating the earth, and there's this orange tree down the road that gives its abundance every day, which feels like love. These juicy oranges. But what's happening between us is this giving and receiving, and when I eat that orange, I think of that tree. Somehow this will connect later on. So my topic title is Red Hot Sadhana. Sadhana is a Sanskrit word, simply put, a specific spiritual path, like one that we're individually walking, and there's a quality of being ground down by sadhana, refined, shaped, going through a fire, which is another big element. When you see it on my book, I had this designed by a great artist friend in California, because fire has been part of my process. And doing spiritual work, whatever the nature of our spiritual work is, creating an alchemical chamber. And oftentimes there's heat and there's difficulty. In my story, there's a lot of passion and love, that kind of fire. So in the fire of love and loss, is the whole title. Have people read this book? Has anyone read this book? Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a cliffhanger. What I want to start with is by Stephen Jenkinson, who is a spiritual teacher in his own right. I don't know what lineage he would be part of, but he teaches about death. He spent a lot of time in what he calls the death trade, and he's a great wisdom holder on the topic of loss and conscious dying. And he has this quote that has guided me ever since I heard it. Grief is love that has slipped out of view. And part of his teaching, too, is the acknowledgement of limits. That even though we're, I think, all in America and given this Western, we can have it all whenever we want. It's infinite, endless. We could do whatever we want to the earth and not have repercussions. There's endless resource. In actuality, there are limits. There are finite resources. Nature works within limits. This planet works with limits, which is a natural part of the cycle. So there is death, there is loss, there is constant change. It's one of the things we can be guaranteed of. So I'm a meditation practitioner, and eventually, after practicing for a few years, became a teacher of meditation on the entry level. And I worked with a Buddhist teacher, Fleet Mall, who had a prison pen pal project in Boulder. And it was a project that supported meditators inside prison and outside prison. By the way, I'll be talking a little bit, but I'm not formal. So if there's questions or dialogue, this can be like we're around the fireplace having a conversation. So if someone wants to say something or ask something in the middle of me talking, just feel free. It's the feminine space. So I was living in Boulder at the time and volunteering for this nonprofit that was explicitly a support through writing of meditators inside prison and outside of prison. I don't know what my deal is, what my karma is. I have clear, repetitive indication that I have karma with prison and beings in cages and working with my own prison. That could be another way to talk about sadhana, right? We live in prisons, self-imposed, self-affirmed prisons. And what the spiritual path is a way out of that prison and seeing the false nature of the prison. So that's been a theme of my life, always. I've always been attracted to places of great suffering, people of great suffering, and big, meaty, heavy situations. It's just the way I came in. So it's not really a surprise, given my background and interest, that I would be drawn to volunteer at a nonprofit that was working with people in prison, and then one day heard a letter being read by like the star of this nonprofit, Sunny. And I was immediately feeling all sorts of familiarity and buzz and intrigue and like, oh my God, I want to hear more about this person who was in prison for a significant amount of time at the time we started writing. Just very self-reflective and honest and practicing meditation at that time, he was in Attica. If anyone's heard of Attica, that's where those terrible riots were in the 70s. Can I curse on these things?
No fucking way.
No fucking way. Okay. I'm like, again, I'm from New Jersey and the whole prison thing. And we will definitely be hearing Bukowski tonight. He's one of my guides. He very much fits. So I asked to write, and I started correspondence with this man, Sonny, who was in Attica at the time. And that went on for 4 years. So this book, just so you know, is really easy to read. I write like I talk. The chapters are short. It's juicy, red hot steel. There is a sensual red hot quality to the whole story. And then there's depth, because I have dedicated my life to the Dharma, study of wisdom, for the last 20 plus years. And so the inner sanctum of the story is very much practice related. So this is a context that there are no mistakes. Out of nowhere, like the magic and mystery of a hummingbird, Sunny's strong voice and presence appeared in my life from the depths of solitary confinement in a New York State prison. His first letter glistened with unmistakable familiarity. The rawness, self-honesty, accountability, and reckoning with himself and his crimes drew me in immediately. I wanted to know more. The outer circumstances were hell for him, but it created an uncommon opportunity for Sunny and I to get to know each other through the rare gift of handwritten letters, not emails or texts. With a pen and stamps, we slowly unfolded our cramped and tangled inner worlds on the sunny beach of paper, curiosity, care, and immaculate listening. And so the writing began, and Sunny was a great writer, really great writer, is a great writer. And I didn't think I was a writer, but I found myself writing letters and letters, 25, 28, 32-page letters back and forth, and running to the post office like a woman on fire. And we were, for the first 4 years, just friends. The people who ran the nonprofit put the fear of God in me about not even saying basically that I was a woman. Like, we would just talk about meditation and very strong boundaries. And you know how it goes. Sometimes we just can't resist. And eventually where the letter writing went is it got a little more personal. Sunny's mother died. We got closer, more personal. Sunny has a very tragic life. His mom had a very tragic life. And then my mom died when I was 28, and I was a child caregiver for 19 years, which plays in somewhat to my draw to people in suffering. And I always related to my mom as being incarcerated in her body. And she was bedbound for many years and feeding tube and couldn't do anything, but felt everything. So that was a lot of my conditioning, is just being a witness and caregiver to somebody in unextractable suffering. And when she died, and as she was dying, I wanted my dog, and I wanted to write and receive letters from Sunny. That was my solace and comfort. And when she did die, and I was back in New Jersey, because most of this correspondence happens in Colorado, but then I moved back to New Jersey to be with my mom for the last year of her life. And when she died, there was a big vacuum in my life. And really, I didn't know it then, but my identity as somebody who just cares for somebody. Like, instead of really having my own experience, I was very much involved in somebody else's experience. And in that space, after she died, I tentatively wrote the letter and said to Sunny, like, I want to come meet you in prison. And so this is when the story picks up. And I had never been to prison before. And I had never met Sunny before, even though we had shared a lot in these letters. Prison is a character in this story, and it represents this topic of love and loss. Prison is one loss after another. It's a place of loss and restriction and hardship. So I started visiting. Sunny was in a solitary confinement prison at the time that I first met. And it's weird. You would think you can't visit anybody in solitary confinement, but you can. They're just locked behind a cage. Whereas a regular visit, you could sit at like a cafeteria table together. In solitary confinement, all you can do is, you can't hug, you can just hold hands, and they're behind a cage. Really intense. But I wanted to know about Sunny, and I wanted to know about the culture of prison and how, especially, does somebody practice anything in that kind of environment. I'm really convinced my exposure, both just having been inside as a visitor many times and also just such close proximity to Sunny and lots of other pen pal and friends over the years, and hearing their stories, that prisons, probably across the world, I don't know, but in the United States, they are literal hell realms. Hell realm, in simple terms, is just a place of aggravated, unrelenting, unimaginable suffering, like no escape suffering other than what you do with your own mind and working with your own emotions. And that was what was my particular draw to Sunny, is that he, prior to meeting me, had a yoga practice and a meditation practice. And we didn't know it, but we shared a connection with Thich Nhat Hanh, who, if anyone knows him, he's a Zen Buddhist Vietnamese teacher. Pretty famous, like after the Dalai Lama. Like he's kind of like the next big famous Buddhist. And that was my first introduction to meditation. And I took refuge vows with him. And Sunny, out of everybody he had read, considered Thich Nhat Hanh his guiding influence. And so that was one of our early bonds. It's a funny little story. So I have this relentless nature. I'm an advocate. I am persistent. When I care about people, I really care about them. I'm very protective. And for Sunny, I wanted the best. Like I got in there just as a friend and I'm like, I want to support this person's well-being, especially on the inner world, in any way I could possibly think of, to create conditions from outside and through our connection to foster an environment that kept him encouraged to keep rallying around Dharma. And that became my life's mission after my mom died. I lost that role as a caregiver and trying to give her comfort. And then I was like, okay, I moved on. I'm seeing this with some reflection years and years later, but that's part of the psychology. How can I brighten his circumstances? Because he lived in hell. Sunny has a huge scar on his face, a thick, untreated scar from his mouth to basically his ear. He went into prison when he was 17, and within a few days, he was greeted with someone slashing his face, not ever getting medical treatment, just dealing with it in blood. I mean, these are the kind of scenarios that are so common. So I'm a woman too. Sunny, besides his writing and words, which were very appealing, and his self-honesty, really self-honest. He was in there for serious crimes. He owned that he did them, and he lived with the weight of the crimes. And he thanked his godmother, who instilled enough in him, he said, so he didn't lose his conscience altogether, because he went from being homeless on the streets to juvenile delinquent halls to prison at age 17 with a 25 to life sentence. So he pretty much just lived in traumatic-based circumstances. But he had this godmother, this fairy godmother, literally, who taught him some things and I think kept his heart open enough to be interested in the path and do some reflection. And that was prior to knowing me, and that was part of my draw. So a year after we met, we got married, which was probably not anybody's top choice for me, but they didn't even really try to stop me. Someone said to me that there's just certain things we have to go through in our life. What do they say? There's 3 types of karma. This is from Dr. Svoboda. The one is with a little bit of effort, we can change the course of something. something like this. And the second one is with a whole lot of effort, really grinding effort. We have the possibility of changing the course of something. And I don't know how this fits with the third one, but this is the point. The third one is that there's inexorable karma. Inexorable, like there's things that we just have to go through, no matter what. There's just no denying good, bad, ugly, right or wrong. And that connects to that teaching, which I learned from Ma Devaki. She's an Indian saint, basically a woman, and she's a trustworthy communicator of Yogi Ram Sarkamar's teaching and talks a lot about karma and that there are no mistakes. We have our roads to go through. We have our contracts with other people that we have to bump up against and see through. And this inexorable karma, where it's like we just have to go through something, was absolutely my case with being drawn to somebody in prison and consciously and completely deciding to marry them, knowing that he has a 25 to life sentence. And if you don't know what that means, whenever they add life, which is a real cruelty, real special brand of American fucked up suffering, life means you may never get out of prison. And the psychological effect it has on people is that no matter how much good time you do, as if 25 years is not enough, there's always this heavy cloud that they can keep you in forever. This is not done like in Europe. It's very uncommon to even have a 25-year sentence, even for murder, because it's more of a model of these are our citizens. How do we create healing and bring them back in to society versus banish them? Fleet Mall, the Buddhist teacher who I did this nonprofit work with, he was in prison himself for 14 years as a senior meditation student in the Shambhala world of Trungpa Rinpoche. He said a quote that I'll never forget. He said that the U.S. prison system is where we dump our collective shadow. As a culture, everything we don't want to deal with, all of the pain and the suffering we have built this country on and the denial and everything shadowy in the darkness. And because we're American, we've learned how to make a huge financial profit out of it too. You make no doubt about it. Prison system is an industry. This is an underlay of my book too. Prison's a character in terms of how it smells, feels, how it shapes things. I have an interesting relationship, and so did Sunny, with prison, because it's a weird environment too. In terms of spiritual practice, if a person wants to engage in that way, it's very supportive. It was an environment that gives you a very strict schedule, a lot of suffering. What does inner peace look like when you never hear silence? And not only do you not hear silence, if you're sensitive to sound, which I am, or noise, I should say, I'm one of those people that like a leaf blower sends me over the edge. My nervous system is off the charts. And in prison, it's nothing but ragged noise filled with fear, agony, terror, or dissonant 5 different TVs and music stations going at the same time at high volume, people cursing, people screaming, people fighting, the metal clanging, just this hellish noise alone. It's so big that for those interested, and there's definitely some great souls in there who, for whatever reason, I don't think it's very hard to get in prison. I think many of us could make one wrong choice in a set of circumstances and find ourselves in shocking situation. But that suffering creates necessity for some to want to inquire, how do I find some inner peace? How do I find some refuge? How do I find some sanity in an insane world? How do I keep my conscience? And so that was my interest, besides just a love interest in this man, Sunny. And what I can say about myself is that I'm someone who goes full out, 100%, unabandoned. I had this inexorable karma to have this experience. Good, bad, painful, sexy, adoring. I've really had a full gamut. Yes, I absolutely had to write a book about the whole thing because it was really the first time that I began to have my own experience of everything I had witnessed and gone through as the lens of a caregiver in part. And I don't think that's the only thing. I think we're constituted of different pieces. We have our psychology. We also have our spiritual higher selves, our aim or purpose, what we're here to be doing in life. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm somebody who's designed to go into dark places. I have a certain, not only interest and compassion, but just ease and facility to be in those places. So prison broke my heart, but it also really trained me to spend so much time in a place of negativity with a prayerful heart. Like an example of doing sadhana in prison. Most people who are in prison have a loved one, they're minimum 2 hours away. And that's lucky. Usually we're talking 4, 5, 6, a plane ride away, because the way the US system is set up is never close to the community where the person is from. And so there's an extreme effort needed for loved ones to stay close. So you drive. Many of the people are poor. I was fortunate to drive. I haven't been, but I've heard in women prisons, they're almost empty of visitors. In male prisons, they're filled. Every visit is filled, usually dominantly with women. I don't know what that says, but somehow not a big surprise. No offense, men. Women, we're pretty caring of our people. And so it's like this long drive, and then you get there, and as soon as you park the car, the signs are very threatening. You don't know what's the right thing to do. There's just this foreboding, punitive / confusing. Like my experience, at least of the state system, I haven't spent so much time in the federal system, is it's purposeful to not be that clear about rules and regulations so that somebody is anxious and always under the control of the staff. And each prison in the state system has different rules. It's different in federal. Anyway, as soon as you get in the parking lot, it's intense. And if you're someone who's empathic, feeling, which I am, coming up to a place where 2,000 plus people are locked in this hell realm, and some have been in there for decades or will be in there for life. I mean, it's really an intense place of negativity and suffering. And then going through the whole security process is very demeaning oftentimes. I've definitely met some beautiful people who work for the system, but many of them are trained to treat visitors not much different than how they treat prisoners, which is not good. Again, there are some beautiful exceptions to that, but just intimidating, sometimes nasty, and they make you wait. There's a sadhana in itself, just waiting. You have to do an enormous amount of waiting if you have a connection. That might be a general crossover for anyone. Waiting is a limit. We don't get things immediately. And what kind of attitude can I rest in the middle of waiting? And prison really trained me, because here I was with this aim to bring some brightness and some encouragement and Dharma wisdom. And it's much better when you can be what you're speaking. It's more authentic. And I had to just go through the gauntlet because I'm feisty. I come from an activist background, and I would just get into the lobby waiting to go through the whole process. And it's so crazy making. And I would just get so angry and would have my rant go on and how unjust this is and what a waste it is and how they're treating people and how they're treating children, always children. every visit I've ever been on. That could be a whole book in itself, is just witnessing children see their parents or loved ones in prison. Anyway, I quickly learned to see prison as a teacher for me, that I had to get with my opinions and my reactions and my anger and just be as bright and as friendly as I could, because I didn't make all that effort and didn't want to go and sit across a table with Sonny and just give him more of what he's surrounded in, which is bitterness and anxiety and rage, really rage. I had to just keep getting bigger and transcend it on the spot, because I wanted to be different. And not only for Sonny, my experience always, in all my times in prison, was always aware of the other prisoners and their families, and the staff too. The staff really suffers. And so I have a chanting practice, just reciting a prayer. And so it was a lot of what I was doing on the inside through the vehicle of conducting this relationship and marriage with Sonny on the outside. I don't know that I'm going to tell the whole story, because my wish is for people to read this book. But for sure, there's a lot more about love. And so we did get married. And there's 5 states in the United States that have what are called family reunion programs, also known as conjugal visits. And I was really blessed to be in New York State, which was one of the states that has them. So for some of the time, depending on what prison Sonny is in, we get to have these 2-day, they're called trailer visits. There's another name, you could read that in my book. I mean, if you wanted to know about prison and loving someone in prison, I mean, it's a story. But there would be these 2-day, pretty magical time shared of me being able to go in the prison and getting way in the labyrinth of a prison. Literally, like, I wouldn't know exactly how to get back out. These are crazy places. And just the feeling of gate after gate being locked behind me. And I would bring in my food, which I had to spend a very meticulous, anal retentive time making sure I got just the right things that can get in, and make sure that I don't bring things that can't get in. Everything is security, and everything is just laced with anxiety. And it's so important, because you made all this effort, you missed your person. It was really a gift for me to just be able to cook for Sonny, real food, filled with love, put my little altar up in the space so there was some blessing energy in the trailer, and just commune with this person who I knew so well in one way in terms of spirit and soul and writing, but not so much in daily life. And the trailer visits gave us a deeper snapshot, still not regular life, as many people have pointed out. A lot of fire, a lot of love, and loss. There was always, I just wrote Stream of Consciousness yesterday, nothing means anything. We are starting fresh every day. The field we live in is steeped in loss and change. There should never be a surprise when we lose, because the setup is loss. But that need not detract us from living full out. And the whole experience of the trailer visits, full blown, ecstatic. Like, I have known ecstasy in my life and passion. And one thing prison really can teach a person is gratitude for small things, like gratitude and humility. I would spend so much time missing Sonny, wanting to know about his well-being, wanting to feed him, wanting to just get in there, and also send prayers, good energy to all the people who live there. Because there's so much waiting and separation and intense circumstances, prison can really clarify priority and create appreciation and humility for simple things like sitting outside in the sun with Sunny. And most of the time it was just visits in these stale, think high school cafeteria with the cleaners. And it always smelled like this acrid chicken wings that they microwave for a minimum of 12 minutes. They're pre-cooked chicken wings from a vending machine. Never got used to this. I'm pretty healthy, eat at Whole Foods, drink water, kale and all that. So the whole food clash, I would go in there and people were thrilled to get these pre-cooked chicken wings. And for whatever reason, the mentality is like we had to microwave them for 12 minutes. And it just created this god-awful smell. I feel like suffering has a smell, dank concrete, sweat. You could smell sweat. For a prisoner to go on a visit, they have to get strip searched coming in and going out. A strip search is intimate. I don't know what they do to women. Oh, I don't even want to think about it. But for men, men have to bend over and spread their cheeks to sometimes people who are into humiliation. And that's how they come into meeting their loved ones. And then they know that they have to go out that way. Sorry for being so graphic, but it's a reality. And Bukowski, he doesn't deny anything. Has anyone not heard of Bukowski? He's a great American poet from LA. Besides just his dedication to writing, I find such solace in reading him because he's somebody who accepted all of humanity, all of life. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't deny anything. He could be brutal and disgusting. And in the next paragraph, he could take your breath away with his insight and gentleness and vulnerability of his own broken heart. I think he hung out with some prisoners for sure. He definitely hung out with prostitutes and homeless people. These people have a lot to teach when we don't have such psychological luxury to hang out with a lot of our middle-class suffering. I don't know what everyone's background is, but I come from a middle class. There's a lot of not invented suffering, but psychological versus in prison. It was a reality for Sonny to go or maybe not go on the chow line to get cereal because he was afraid somebody was going to stab him in the back. That's daily, regular occurrence. And so how that stark, intense reality shapes people definitely has a negative impact, but the positive impact was really good instincts and real no bullshit. Sonny, for me, and people like him have a lot of street wisdom and cut to the core intelligence because he can't afford and they can't afford to be bogged down with stuff that if we're not so close to the bone, we might get bogged down to. So it was a real blessing for me to have that contact. But back to the family reunion visits. So the built-in setup was a place for total appreciation and love and passion and just really getting to share time with one of my favorite people. And built into the reality was the loss, the known loss. We have 42 hours, I think it was. And this is going to go away. This is going to change. And we know this theoretically, but we don't necessarily live that way. But prison makes you live that way. And to just go full in, I always felt like it took some time to just disarm Sonny. He would come in and he just had his armor and his combat gear, not towards me, but just from the environment. And he was more gray. And we'd come into the trailer visits. We had our roles where he would clean the space. I would unpack the food and I would try to make the food as presentable as possible. decorating with oranges and zucchinis, and, because they're real food and they're colorful. And it was like a de-thawing. And doing that work, it was such a beautiful thing to share, and knowing that it would come to an end. And for him, it was going back into that world where he did have to armor up. I watched one time, kind of secretly, he didn't totally want me to see him that way, but I watched after one of these exchanges where for him to go back to the prison he was transported with his hands in shackles, his feet in shackles. So his hands are shackled to his waist, and he was just shuffling. And it was just to see any human being tethered like that is something hard to witness. And even more so when you love the person. And I saw the color and the humanity come out of his face. And then knowing that he was going back into the environment he was in, and I was going to go drive 4 or 6 hours by myself and resume my sadhana of waiting and praying. So part of the story in my story is a lot of prayer for his freedom. And there was lots of good people in my life from my spiritual path who also extensively prayed for the possibility that Sonny would come out of prison. And that extended to going to India many times and asking Ma Devaki, and she prayed intensively for this possibility. So that's part of this story. The collective effort to give Sonny a second chance of life out here, and for me, a marriage on the outside.
You put everything into the relationship, it seems like. And it did not work out the way you wanted. Maybe you're not going to speak about all of that, but it didn't work out. How did you work with the emotions and the loss that you experienced? What's been the impact of working on such a deep emotional level? And is there anything that you would say to us, to others, about being with love and loss? I mean, we all experience it.
Yeah, we all do. Well, I will say writing has become a dear, dear friend. Writing for me is a passageway to become my own witness and my own friend. Because I think we all go through so much experience, and a lot of it we can't process at the time. Either we don't know how, or there's not space, or the situation is so demanding in some way. But that has been a core part of my process, is to write. And a lot of my writing involves crying, screaming, Pearl Jam, cursing. I really let it rip. This book was written by hand. I wrote this whole thing by hand originally. I had sheets of paper, not a notebook. And I just wrote in front of my altar all the stuff that I had to say and the memories to go through. I mean, if you know anything about prison or ever been in love, inevitably it doesn't work out the way we think or want. And there's challenge and disappointment.
You were warned about not getting involved with a maximum security prison.
I don't think anybody in my life wanted me to go down this route. The only person who I would have listened to a little bit, but not really, was my spiritual teacher. And he tried a little bit, but I wasn't in a big hearing mode. The comment he made to me was, I wish you didn't have to go down such a hard road, but I'll be by your side. And he was. Because there was no way I was not going to go down this track. Even Sonny himself was very tentative. He was much more guarded than me, because I think it weighed on him that he saw how I was and who I am, and I'm so different from where he came from. And he wasn't eager to have me in his dark world. He benefited from it in the journey of falling in love and really my persistence, he gave in and we shared what we share. But yeah, this is not a path I would necessarily recommend to anybody. I've done intense things my whole life. Even right now, what I'm doing, I'm starting my life over in a brand new way without much of a plan or job or money, totally across the country, going on faith and talking to people I know, be like, do you know somebody in LA? It's been my nature. And I can tell you with the disappointment and the grief is love that has slipped out of you. That's a great one whenever you go through grief, to make that connection that it's love that slipped out of you. It's the wholeness of life, death, the dance in the middle. I've caught fire with writing. It's a funny part of the story because the fight I always had with Sonny was that he had to write our story and his story, and I was just on him about writing, and it was always this fight because he's a gifted writer, but he didn't want to. And in the end, God has a sense of humor, and I wrote the book, and now I can't stop. It's such a refuge and a way to deal with disappointment.
Has he read the book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did he like it?
He said, great insight, authentic, dignified, and courageous. Oh, so one of my commitments of going through loss and disappointment and pain, just straight up pain, is I refuse to be bitter. I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to rewrite history and say, oh, I shouldn't have. I do not regret my journey. It's hard. It's a hard journey. But a young woman came to me and said, I want to marry somebody in prison. I'll be like, okay, wow. If they're bound to go that way, I'm not gonna. We can't change people. I poured in everything I had into this situation, and it wasn't the ending, I thought. And there's also so much blessing and miracle and learning. That's part of sadhana, is taking whatever lump of stuff life gives you, and it will give us. And even in the depths of loss, how do we make a profit? How do we spin gold out of the shit? And it's aim and intention and attitude. And I will not doubt the journey I've been on. I can't. It all informs everything else. What a waste of time, right? For any of us. If you have anything in your life that's like, this was a mistake, or I shouldn't have done that, you're beating yourself up, please have this be the takeaway from this talk, is give yourself grace, let that go. All of it is learning. All of it is to create some kind of fiber in you. For me, I feel everything deeply, and I experience a lot of pain in my life. And I feel like that's a gift to cultivating some compassion and understanding for other people who go through their hardships, and animals and plants. When we know pain, we can feel others' pain, and we can be maybe a sweet little space of understanding, even without words, for others. May it be useful, like whatever hardship we go through, whatever disappointment, and loss is inevitable. Dharma teaches us the law of impermanence. Everything is informed by impermanence. Nothing stays the same. No one stays with us. No situation stays the same. If we can keep on a practical level putting that ahead of ourselves while we're in the midst of life and love and decision making, to accept the loss and the change and the not the way we thought it was going to be, we can stay in the flow of grace. because there's always a bounty of abundance coming in some way. How could I throw out the pain? Pain for me was how I could learn that I had a book in me. And for anyone who's written a book, it's a hell of a thing to like labor. And then in the end, you actually have a physical manifestation. And I'm a lover of books. Books are my best friend. So to actually have one come out was worth anything I had to go through. It's like all the blues music, right? Who loves blues? Those guys, they have to go. They have to be at the bottom of the barrel, suffering, because that's where the good shit comes from. Not that we want to we don't have to go look for it. It's going to come in all sorts of ways. I found this song. The title is I Am a Man of Constant Sorrow. And it just catches me every time. It hooks me. There's a beauty to it. And that's the title, I'm a Man of Constant Sorrow. And that's the mood of it. It captures me every time. And I'm like, oh, what's the deal? So I went and looked at the lyrics and I'm like, what's his sorrow about? Because I'm a woman of constant sorrow, but not only, joy too. They go together. And sure enough, I looked it up and it's connected. It's a theme song for a movie about 3 escaped convicts from Mississippi. I was like, I knew it. It's connected to prison. We were in Oklahoma City. Nobody was there. It was like one of these hotels where just all off the highway, nothing. And then I went to go start packing the car. And nobody was around. And I come out and this man walks up to me and he's like, excuse me, ma'am. Can you help me? I just got out of the Oklahoma penitentiary and I need help. And I was just of course. I'm like, of course you would find me. And he was telling me stuff about parole and that he needs this license, but he needs $25 and his parole officer didn't help. And everything he was saying was tracking true from what I know about parole. And he looked clear-eyed. And I was like, okay. I was like, so what do you need? He's like, $25. I was like, just wait here. So he sat and I went upstairs. So I go out and I brought some cash and I had an orange and an apple. And I had a little something of Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar. I mean, he's like a blessing force for anyone who wants. You don't have to believe anything. So I just brought all that out with me. And I was like, are you hungry? I have an apple and an orange. And he said, I'll take the orange. I can't eat the apple. They took all my teeth out in the penitentiary. But I'm hungry. So he just immediately starts eating the orange. And I gave him a 20 and he keeps talking to me more. And I just liked him and I was just feeling for his journey. And I was like, if I give you 5 more, you can complete your thing. He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm trying to work. Nobody will let me work for them. And he seemed earnest. So I gave him another 5. And then I asked him if he wanted a little kind of bonus spiritual help. And he was like, no, I totally would. And so he left with a little Yogi Ram Sarat Kumar. He's homeless. I don't know, he was under the bridge or something. But my life is colored that way. Like I was just in Ireland before, and 2 of the people who got my book were people who had done prison time in Ireland. And it was just the way life put it together that those were who I found and connected and gave my book to. And that's probably true for all of us. It is true for all of us that we're meant to encounter whatever lob of stuff life wants to offer us on the plate, to learn how to digest it and put it in the fire of alchemy and intend on finding the gold out of the situation. Prison for me, full-on devotional marriage was gold for me and what it gave, including what it took. There's just no separation. You know, I am a woman of constant sorrow. I am. But I also know seek beauty, avoid suffering. I don't do so great at the avoiding suffering part, but I do seek beauty. And I do know about joy. And I experientially understand how they go together in the fullness of life. And it is a balance. I was telling a friend who I'm living with that if we're someone who's got a lot of compassion, we're just able to see and understand deeply what is driving people, even if they're doing behavior that's harmful, but we could see beyond, like, really what was like the child in them? What kind of experience did they grow up with that would lead to this, and having compassion. But I've had to learn, part of what prison has taught me and working with people from extreme traumatic backgrounds for my own health is empathy regulation. It's a gift to have empathy, and some of us have to actually cultivate empathy. It's not our strong suit. But for a feeler like me, part of the discipline and healing process I've been is learning how to regulate it. There should be some boundaries, some wisdom added to compassion. But I would only learn that through going through certain fires. That's how there's no mistakes in our path. This is not philosophy. I really, in my bones, understand that to be true. No matter how drastic it might be or how much shame we have put on ourselves. You know, the word convict is really a sad way to refer to somebody who's done all that time in prison. To come out, they've done their time, and then to still be called as a convict. They're slapped with a label of the worst thing they've ever done. Another phrase for people coming out of prison, it's a little more cumbersome. You have to work for it. It's like nonviolent communication. Have you ever done that? Like, it doesn't come so easy at the beginning. But you call somebody coming out of prison a returning citizen, welcoming them back as a citizen. They're no longer in prison. They've done their time. Let's give people a second chance. And let's give ourselves, as practitioners or just fumbling humans on planet Earth on 2024, this shit ain't easy. Earth is just a place for learning. We come here to learn our lessons, not in a punitive way, but to grow our consciousness and to evolve as souls. We come to Earth to learn. It's an educational field. It's not a heaven realm. Apparently those exist, but this is not. And so I would love for this talk to be an invitation for people to give themselves grace around whatever they've been through, whatever they've decided, not decided, to get on the mountaintop and have a much fuller, elevated perspective of how this informs that and this shapes this, and how it's just like one big circle. I'm really into circles. To finish my book, I had an editor friend. She read the whole thing and she was like, "This is great. I love it. It's publishable. I think it's going to be a movie." She's like, "But your beginning and end suck." She's from New Jersey. Sucks. Terrible. You're insufferable. I'm like, "Tell me what you really think." She's like, "But I'm going to help you." And for a whole summer, every Friday, she came over and she trained me how to write an ending, conclusion, what you do first. The very last thing you can write for a book, in her way, was the beginning, the intro, because it's the hardest. It's the hardest part for anyone. As an author, you can't really know what the journey is to bring people in until you've come to the end. And so I wrote the end 16 times, her screaming at me crying, burning it in the fire. And she's explaining it to me. The ending is when you've taken them through a story. So it's like a funnel, and you've taken them through a story, which is the narrow part. And then at the end, you want to make it broad enough for the reader, whoever they are. You know, many people who read my book haven't had an experience with a marriage in prison. But how can they take the principles? What are the learning nuggets that they can apply to their own life? So the funnel goes out that way. And that's the goal of a good conclusion. Take them through the story, and then you make it applicable to the reader so that they feel enriched. And then the other side is the intro. You have a broad base of people that you're trying to get in. So you have like a big net, and you're trying to funnel them in to a narrow story. So it has to be very compelling, likable, tell enough to make it interesting, but not too much that you give it away, and nothing added. It's like a daunting process. So she's explaining this to me, and I was like, is it like a circle? The beginning and the end? They actually go together? You can't know how the beginning starts to the end? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I never thought of it that way, but it is a circle. And that just fit my whole wise woman understanding of life, that it's life, death, three guanas, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, the Hindu. It's all one thing. There is no separation between birth and death. If you've been in a birth chamber and you've been in a death chamber, they feel very similar. A baby coming in and a person leaving. And so I just started painting circles to get the intro. And I haven't stopped. I haven't stopped writing. I haven't stopped painting circles because it helped bodily get that connection in. And it really is a view of how to look at our entire lives, no matter what has happened or what hasn't happened, what we did, what we didn't do. Sonny said prison saved his life. Prison saved his life and saved other people's lives. That if he wasn't stopped by prison, he would have been likely killed and would have definitely caused more harm because he was a reckless guy from East New York, Brooklyn. If you know anything about East New York, Brooklyn, tough. He said everyone he knows from his neighborhood, everyone in prison, shot and killed, drug addicted, has AIDS or died of AIDS. It's that kind of environment. So our society sets people up, especially poor, and especially Black people, brown people, or poor white people. It's crazy, the numbers. It's something like since the 70s, our prison population has gone like 300% up.
I did want to comment on seek beauty, avoid suffering. My feeling is that the kind of suffering that you're talking about, it's real, it's deep, it's raw, and it's intimately connected to and enmeshed with our humanity. And what's been called luxury suffering, neurotic suffering, where you're just repeating the same thing over and over and over again, coming out of your psychology, unconscious about it. I think you're talking about something very, very different. But it really is the path of a warrior to be able to be in suffering with a deeply empathetic, open heart, knowing your heart's going to be broken and your heart is broken and you still turn towards it.
Bukowski, they say he was the king of pain, the bearing witness of the reality of deep suffering in the world and not shying away from it. And if I understand Mr. Lee's seek beauty, avoid suffering is avoiding when I can get indulgent in my own neurotic suffering. The victim story, the worry. Worry is a big one for me. Seek beauty, avoid worrying. So this is Bukowski for Jane. Did anyone see Barfly, the movie? That was the woman in there. 225 days under grass, and you know more than I. They have long taken your blood. You are a dry stick in a basket. Is this how it works? In this room, the hours of love still make shadows. When you left, you took almost everything. I kneel in the nights before tigers that will not let me be. What you were will not happen again. The tigers have found me, and I do not care. And then the next poem, Eulogy to a Hell of a Dame. Some dogs who sleep at night must dream of bones, and I remember your bones in flesh, and Bess in that dark green dress and those high-heeled bright black shoes. You always cursed when you drank. Your hair coming down, you wanted to explode out of what was holding you. Rotten memories of a rotten past, and you finally got out by dying, leaving me with a rotten present. You've been dead 28 years, yet I remember you better than any of the rest. You were the only one who understood the futility of the arrangement of life. All the others were only displeased with trivial segments, carped nonsensically about nonsense. Jane, you were killed by knowing too much. Here's a drink to your bones that this dog still dreams about. Grief is love that has slipped out of view.
Jessica, where can they get the book?
Thank you. Number one, if you want to support an author, ever buy it directly from the author. It is on Amazon.
And then they pay you $1 a book.
Yeah, Amazon pays me for a printed copy. I get $1.56.
Well, let me just ask about your email address. Are you open to giving it out right now?
Yeah, totally.
Jessica Jens, JENNS7
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate everyone's attention and opportunity to just speak. It's part of the healing to be seen and heard. I've always been behind people and situations. Part of the process of writing a book is being forward and seen and connecting for myself with people.